Right, so today, guys, we have the full interview from the Palworld CEO, which is going to be really interesting to read through today. I'm looking forward to sharing you guys all of that information. I'm hoping to see a patch go live this week at some point to fix a few other things for the game, but we'll hopefully hear a little bit more from the full team later on in the week. So yeah, the game's been going pretty well. Like I said in my other videos, they're probably still at this stage where they're like so shocked with everything that's going on. I mean, I've been seeing they've been working crazy hours like every single day since the game launched. I think on the weekend the game launched, they barely slept from what I've been told. You know, they did not expect these millions of players. But I'm looking forward to reading through to this to you guys today. If you do enjoy, as always, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you want to keep up to date with your daily Palworld content, and let's just get straight in with today's news. As always, I'll be leaving the source to the full interview in the link in the description. I always like to do this to give credit, but also I like to do this just so you guys can see where the source came from, so it's not just me sitting here talking. So yeah, it was an exclusive interview with the Automaton, and they said Palworld dev talks about game influences, original assets, and the possibilities of the future of the game. So obviously, Japanese developer Pocket Pair released Palworld in early access back on January 19th for the Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and the PC on Steam. It's crazy to think it was actually only January 19th. This game feels like it's been out even longer for some reason. It's just done so well. Having previously released titles such as Craftopia and Overdungeon, Pocket Pair has a track record in creating unique and unconventional titles by fusing existing game mechanics and assets. Palworld is Pocket Pair's fourth title, and it seems to be their most eye-catching and polished work to date. It started its development back in 2021, but how did Palworld come to be? We asked Pocket Pair's CEO all about Palworld's development, including the hardships they faced and how the prospect of a PvP mode. So anyway, this is the full interview. So I would like to congratulate you in advance on the early access release of Palworld. Please introduce yourself. He says, I'm hoping I pronounced his name correctly. Mizobi, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, is the CEO of Pocket Pair. Since its establishment, Pocket Pair has released 3 games, and Palworld will be our 4th release. I was originally an engineer in the web industry and did all kinds of work, including starting up businesses, but eventually my love for video games brought me back to the game industry. After working on various titles, I finally come to the point where I can work on a relatively large-scale game such as Palworld. And to be honest, it's become probably one of the best games. I mean, it's only February of 2024, but I mean, it's gonna take something so massive to really dethrone this at the moment, because it was such a good idea. It was like a small indie studio did this, and a lot of the games these days that win Game of the Year, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but they usually have big funding, big AAA companies that are doing these, and I always love to see like a success story on like an up and coming, because it gives everyone out there a chance to really think, I can compete up there with like the top guys. And that's the exciting thing about life. Like everyone has a chance to just randomly do something one day. Do you know what I mean? And it could end up amazing, like what's happened here. So how exactly were you involved in Palworld's development? So we're just working on the credits now, but I was involved in Palworld predominantly as the producer. I dabbled somewhat in direction too. And towards the end of development, I also ended up being an optimization engineer for some reason. So the next thing was, so producing, directing, and optimization, can you tell us about Palworld's development team? So at the time of Crafttopia's early access release, Pocket Pair had less than 10 employees. We started development of our Palworld about 6 months after this, so initially there were only 3 to 4 members on the team. That's crazy. Furthermore, they were all newly hired employees, so Palworld basically started out with an almost completely different development team to that of Craftopia. Then a year later, I mean, imagine, before I say any more, imagine being 3 to 4 members and you're working on this game thinking, you know what, this has hopefully got some potential for the future. And then if you could look into the future, which I personally would never like to do, but you just never know at this stage, and you're one of the best selling games of, obviously of 2024, but of like ages, right? I can't even remember the actual stat of it. But they said then a year later, we had about 10 people on board. In 2 years, the team suddenly grew to 20 to 30 people. And the third year, I added another 10 to 20 new members. We kept making the development team bigger as Palworld's completion seemed nowhere near in sight. By the way, the art department takes up a largest proportion of the team, including motion, background, and 3D artists. We also hired more than 5 new engineers for the project, so the team ended up being quite big. Something also to bear in mind, I've seen lots of information going around that apparently Microsoft, I can't confirm this because I don't have the news for today's video, but I mainly saw a lot of this in my comment section and I saw it online, saying that apparently Microsoft have actually taken some hands-on help in the development of Palworld for the Xbox version. If that's true, please back me up in the comments and let me know where this information's coming through. But I've seen them pushing the game more than anything, Microsoft, so I can imagine that definitely being the case. So how would you describe Palworld in your own words? So put simply, Palworld is an open world survival craft game with an added element of monster taming / collection. It also takes significant inspiration from real-time strategy and automation games. You build bases and your pals work constantly to support you, and I think these mechanics are rare in 3D games. And then obviously this is one of the people that are asking the question, so I had the opportunity to play for a bit, and when I placed pals at my base, they really did help out and work and collect resources for me. And then it says, if I were to name a recent example, Sons of the Forest had an element of partners helping you out with building. It's a similar mechanic to this. And yeah, I really like that. Now, the sad thing with me with Sons of the Forest is I was I was so hyped for Sons of the Forest to come out. And then when it came out, I was playing it with my friends for a bit, and then we literally, I can't remember what took us away from it, but I played a solid couple of hours to start off with, and that was one of the mechanics I really liked as well, because sometimes when you're playing a survival game, to have the ability to either do it all yourself is cool, but you do get to the point where things take a long time, and it really does get to that point where you feel like you're doing so much, and if you can shorten that time by having your own helpers, it's massive, I think. It really is. So Palworld's Steam description introduces some rather dark points. Is it possible to just be a sweet to your pals? And then the CEO goes on to say, I think it will all depend on the player and how they decide to treat their workforce while trying to survive. Some will be kind to their pals because they're cute, and others will work them to the bone in order to lessen their own burden. The game allows you to enjoy either approach. For example, you can provide food and bed for your pals, but you can choose to not to, and the game will allow it. On the other hand, if you want to be affectionate to your pals, you can care for them by building hot springs for them to relax and petting them. Always, I've got to do it. I love my pals too much. I couldn't just put them through the pain of doing all the work for when I come back. As Palworld is centered around collecting monsters, there have been many reactions from users saying, will it be able to launch and will it cause controversy? But what do you think about this? So then they went on, the CEO goes on to say, I'm aware that the Pokemon series is the overwhelming leader in the monster taming / collection genre. In fact, Pokemon is so good that I'm afraid to even try and compare it to Palworld. Pokemon first appeared when I was still a grade schooler, a grade schooler, and it was a social phenomenon. I adore the series too, and recent releases such as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, as well as the open world title Pokemon Legends, have left a deep impression on me. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to continue creating a series that has been adored by people worldwide for 30 years. I think that each Pokemon title is wonderful in how it conveys the spirit of its creators. The concept for our Palworld originated from the thought, would it be possible to add a monster collecting elements to the open world survival craft genre? And although we did reference the Pokemon series as a great predecessor of the genre, Palworld feels completely different game to me, which I think people realize soon as they play it. I would even say that Palworld is a lot more similar to Ark Survival Evolved in terms of game mechanics. And I do agree with that. There's been a lot of stuff, to be honest, when I've played Palworld where I've thought to myself, yeah, this game is crazily similar to Ark Survival. Like, so many of the ways that you hatch the eggs, the crafting, it's very, very Ark. And I feel like they just got it spot on. They really did. There was something so great about Ark, why I loved it, and unfortunately, Ark never took the right steps to really blow up, and they've had the chance to do it, and they still have the chance to do it again. It's just that Palworld coming along has been great, because it's really just taken what everyone wanted and put it into one game. So, will it be able to launch? Feels a bit of an extreme question, but we make our games and we take our games very seriously, and we have absolutely no intention of infringing upon any copyright of other companies. We have undergone legal reviews, and at this moment there have been no specific actions taken by other companies. I know there have been all kinds of rumors floating around on the internet, but rest assured and give our game a chance. So I think they'll be okay. I get how it's got similarities massively and people haven't liked it. But at the end of the day, like I've said in other videos, competition is so important. And, you've got games like Ark, but then you've got other dinosaur games like the IO out there and things. And, it's always good to have the competition. And they've decided to take that competition on, and I like it. What is your understanding of the open world survival craft genre? Were there any particular titles you researched while working on Palworld? I see the open world survival craft genre as something that was derived from Minecraft. You use the word research, but this genre I've always adored, so I've played numerous titles up to now, such as Terraria, The Forest, Sons of the Forest, Conan Exiles, Ark Survival Evolved, and of course Minecraft. In terms of recent hits, I've played Valheim, the indie title Raft, and Rust, although it is a PvP game. I've also played sandbox titles such as Astroneer and Scrap Mechanic, as well as games with novel mechanics such as Sunken Land. Our previous title, Craftopia, was an open-world survival craft game, so I started out on Palworld having accumulated significant knowledge on the genre. There are also many Steam users within our development team, so a lot of them have also played the titles I've just mentioned now. Then they go on to say, as you've mentioned, there are many existing titles in the genre, but what's Palworld's main theme as a survival craft game? So the CEO goes on to say, Palworld was built on the hypothesis that having monsters, pals, act both automatically and emotionally will result in a completely different playing experience than Craftopia. One of the main themes of Craftopia was the automation, and I think it received recognition from the outrageous things users would be able to do with it, many of which we, the developers, had not even anticipated. With Palworld, our idea was to take this a step further by aiming our automation with emotion. Pals will rejoice from the bottom of their hearts if you give them food and pet them, and on the other hand, they will cry and refuse to work if you're rough with them. We're a small-scale indie studio, but we really wanted to go far and beyond in terms of expression of emotion, and this was actually a big percentage of our costs. I mean, imagine making different petting interactions for over 100 pals. I also reference RimWorld in this respect. In RimWorld, each resident acts auto, which can result in various events happening. You can have your whole colony burnt down if you happen to come across a pyromaniac. People can start fighting due to elevated stress and end up losing an eye. There are many unimaginable things happening. We also wanted to introduce interesting aspects like this in the Palworld, which is why we decided to incorporate the emotional and auto pals into an open survival craft game. So there's a question of what events did you come across during test plays? In Palworld, when pals slack off for a certain amount of time, a bad event will occur. I encountered a bad event in which a stressed out pal went on a rampage at my base, setting the house I'd spent 2 hours in building on fire. Basically, you can exploit the pals, but you have to take care and not overdo it, and you need to set up an environment that doesn't stress them up. This question we don't really need to know about the individual traits because we've been playing the game. What are the game elements you consider vital for an open world craft survival game? I may digress from the main point with this, but I think that a multiplayer mode is almost mandatory for a craft survival game. In a multiplayer PvE game, you can easily add single player mode without making big changes to the game system, but for PvP, if you think of it as it's just players beating each other up, it should be simple, and try to implement it without much thought. You're gonna have a hard time. This is why, although it may be obvious, deciding on whether to not include or include PvP is the biggest fork in the road for the development team, and as it changes your list of priorities entirely. For example, in PvP games, fast travel is usually severely restricted, but I don't think the average user nowadays would be able to tolerate an open world game without fast travel. These kind of things make it really difficult to combine PvP and PvE in the same map, and it wasn't until I tried doing it that I realised, oh, so that's why other games don't do that. Trying to make PvP and PvE work with each other means that developing a game with significant limitations in terms of game design is a hard path to take. With Palworld, we made the mistake of thinking we could just casually add PvP on later. However, in the middle of trying to do this, we realised how problematic it was going to be. From that point on, we rushed to make last-minute adjustments so nothing goes against the game's basic premises. Even now, some inconsistencies remain in the game design, and we have to resolve them when the PvP mode releases later, which they've already announced in the roadmap. So some of the other things that I guess I'm just going to skip some of the questions that we don't really need to there was a thing talking a little bit again about the ideas from Craftopia to Palworld, but I think it's better to read through the things such as why did you decide to give Palworld an early access release? So we decided on this 2 to 3 years ago, so I don't think it was a very particular reason. However, we were kind of able to predict that the quality would not be worthy of a full release. Given the development period and scale of Palworld, we wanted to work on it whilst listening to our user feedback rather than release a final complete game. Another big reason was that based on our experience of Craftopia, we felt that early access releases allow us to make the games in the way that suits us, which I completely agree with. So there's often disputes whether it's better to do early access or a full release when launching on Steam. So yeah, and then I think they pretty much just say that, you know, with early access, if it's a full release, people can really come at the game. But in early access, you kind of get that safety barrier. As long as when you do full release and you iron out the main problems, that's absolutely fine. I know there's a bunch of other games out there, survival games, I'm not saying a name, but that do seem to struggle with, even when they go full release, to actually still have the same issues in from there before. But anyway. And yeah, there are some other bits that sort of go link back to Craftopia, but mainly talking about Palworld. So how would you describe Palworld's current state in terms of progress? So I think all of the basic functions are set, so about 60% is complete. The next phase is about further perfecting the game. When we released Craftopia in early access, we didn't know anything, including what game it was, and it was even supposed to be. But with Palworld, we know what kind of game we're making. It's a game in which you collect pals, a game in which you fight bosses, and survival craft. The important points remain are how we're going to implement PvP and to what extent we're going to release new content. We're also prepared to add new game functions, so we'll observe user reactions and decide what to prioritize based on what everyone wants. So yeah, this stuff there's a lot of stuff that we kind of know about already that I'm skipping. But so things about early access, things about Craftopia. Is there anything else really that's important that we go through? Oh right, this is pretty interesting. For Craftopia you use Unity, but for Palworld you went with Unreal Engine. So yes, Unity has its benefits, and so does Unreal Engine. I felt that for when making Palworld, Unreal Engine was more of a suitable option, especially with Unreal Engine 5. Unreal Engine 5 has all the basic things for an open world game covered, and I found it to be more suitable for comparatively heavy game. On the other hand, one of the biggest globally successful open games, Genshin Impact, was created with Unity. Choosing a game engine should be a comprehensive decision based on what kind of game you're making, what country you're making it in, and whether it's multi-platform or not. And many other factors, should be the decision with what you go with. So then they talk about the wish lists, and we'll just go through some other important things. The early access, we already know about release. In the early access launch QA, you mentioned that you're still considering, okay, we know PvP is coming. They say, what kind of content are you envisioning at the moment? So then they say, PvP is very hard, but, you know, it's one of those things that they'll get to, like we've already read. So they say, when considering the reasons to introduce PvP to Palworld, the first thing that comes to mind is the battle format of putting pals against each other. This can involve fighting pals alone or fighting alongside humans. Another thing is to consider is format, such as a competition format in like an arena-like setting, or a format in which players can freely compete anywhere in the entire map in real time. In the case of the arena format, I think that the real-time action battles would be the first thing that users would imagine. However, we are also considering a battle pattern in which pals fight each other automatically. There are also a lot of technical details to be discussed, but we're also considering a format in which pals are registered in the arena and users can freely choose to fight, which would lower the barrier to entry and allow more casual PvP. So, yeah. I think as they say, yes, I hope we're able to implement a PvP model soon, which they've already said they are. That is unique to Palworld and will not be short-lived. Earlier you asked me how I'd like to develop Palworld, but first and foremost, I want it to be a game in which catching pals is fun. After that, I want to make a successful PvP mode as the ultimate goal. So, yeah, I think we covered pretty much the biggest points there from the entire interview. It's a pretty long video, around about 20 minutes, and it could have been even longer if we decided to talk about the old stuff, but I wanted to keep it fairly on top of the most newest and fresh information. I can't wait for this PvP mode. I feel like there's so much they can do with the future of this game, and I feel like this whole arena battles could be massive, and they could really create some huge progression systems like passes and whatever. They can. It's up to them to make the right choices. I have faith in them. They're a new studio to me. I played Craftopia a little bit, but not much. I remember downloading it. I didn't even realize it was Pocket Pair, and it all came back to me when I found out all about the company a little bit more. So that is pretty much all to read through from the full interview from the CEO. We look to have a bright future with this game. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will catch you in my next Palworld video very soon. See you guys then.